that you don't have to seek out doubt. They don't want you to think about doubt. But the standard is they have to prove their case to you by guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to prove their state to you by guilt beyond a reasonable doubt for each of the charges, for each of the elements. It can't be down here as highly unlikely. It is a very high standard. Possibly guilty, probably guilty, doesn't do it. It has to be guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The court is going to charge you. They're going to tell you, for example, that grave suspicion is not sufficient. And let me read you the charge you're going to hear. Facts and circumstances that merely place upon the defendant a grave suspicion of the crime charged, or that merely raises a speculation or conjecture of the defendant's guilt, are not sufficient to authorize a conviction of the defendant. Mr. Short already explained so much about the evidence presented regarding the tragic killing of Donovan Thomas. And I need to start by saying I have deep, deep sympathy for the Thomas family. I cannot imagine what it must be like to lose a loved one to gun violence or any type of violence like that. I myself have 5 children, and just the thought of losing a child tears me up. So I don't know what they must be going through. But I think the evidence that has been shown to you does not demonstrate in any way that Mr. Kendrick is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the killing of Donovan Thomas. And as Mr. Sharp so ably demonstrated to you, I think that there are others whose perhaps guilt or responsibility for Donovan Thomas's death has been demonstrated far more than my client's alleged responsibility. Briefly, to not belabor the point that Mr. Sharp brought up, let's talk about Kenneth Copeland, Little Woody. He was a character, right? I mean, he sat in that witness box, and he's a charismatic fellow, a very interesting guy. And he has certainly made the most of his star turn in this courtroom. But he never testified on this stand that Diamante had anything to do with the killing of Donovan Thomas. He never testified on the stand that Demikian Garlington told him all this stuff, that Kendrick was involved in killing Donovan Thomas. He didn't tell you anything about, at the McDonald's, he learned anything about the killing of Donovan Thomas that Diamante Kendrick was involved in. You didn't hear it at Sky House. You don't hear that from the stand from him. To the degree you heard any of that, it is in that June interrogation tape that was played to you. He was not under oath during that interrogation. And you heard the circumstances from Mr. Sharp, all the pressure that he was under. That was his 5th interrogation following the murder of Donovan Thomas, and the first time he comes up with this story clearly concocted by Demikian Garlington. How'd you like the testimony of Demikian Garlington? Oh, you didn't hear any testimony from Demikian Garlington. Everything Garlington allegedly said, you heard through other people. And again, why did he lie to police? To use Mr. Sharp's phrase, because I always steal from the best. He didn't want to wear the blue jumpsuit. He didn't want to go to Rice Street. He didn't want to be in the Fulton County Jail. He didn't want to face years of prison. He finessed the police. He finessed the police. He is a master liar. He is an admitted master liar. And he has methodologies he uses to lie and try to make it convincing. And he explained all of that to you. Again, why doesn't he want to go to Rice Street? Well, he told you what jail was like. On my cross, he explained what jail was like. When he most recently spent time in jail, he had a broken toilet full of feces. There were flies everywhere. He had no food to eat. He had to put his shirt over his face to act as a mask to try to keep the smell down. What rational person wouldn't do everything they can to avoid that? And of course, now is the next question. How do you know when to ever believe Kenneth Copeland? And I don't have a great answer for you on that. I can tell you what he said on the stand during my cross. He said, "Hand to God, I am telling the truth now. I have God in my heart. I have God in my head." Now, the state would have you believe about Mr. Copeland and Mr. Zachary, who I'll address next, that they got on the stand and they lied here. And they lied here, I'm sure they're going to say, because they're afraid of the defendants. And that is why they lie. But I'm going to argue to you that actually they got on the stand here and they told the truth. And they did it really almost in an act of bravery, because when they get on the stand, the people they're afraid of is the state. They're afraid of the state. The state is the one that has the power to prosecute them. The state is the one that has the power to put them in prison. The state is the one that has the power to put Mr. Copeland in that jail cell with the non-working toilets and the feces and everything else that he is trying to avoid. But despite being afraid of the state, Mr. Copeland gets up here and tells you the truth. Quindarius Zachary, again, he lies to police. He lies to police repeatedly. And when I confronted him with those lies, why did you lie? He said, Yak never told me nothing. Yak never showed me nothing but love. Never showed me nothing but love. But he lied on him anyway. And why did he lie? Because Garlington came to him with a play. And what's the play? The play is to blame other people for the death of Donovan Thomas. Who did Mr. Zachary see in that infinity? He never saw nobody in that infinity but Woody. The Texaco. Oh my gosh, there's the smoking gun. There's the smoking gun that shows that my client murdered Donovan Thomas. He's on video at a Texaco station a block away before the murder. Heaven forbid. He pulls up in that Texaco in a Pontiac. He leaves the Pontiac. He goes, you've seen this video 1,000 times. Well, maybe not that many, but it must feel like it. He leaves the Pontiac to go into the Texaco. And he buys some junk food in the Texaco, goes back into the Pontiac. He sits in the Pontiac. He talks to another car that pulls up. He gets back in the Pontiac. And he leaves in the Pontiac. Go in the back. Watch the video 1,001st time. You're never going to see him get in an infinity. You're never going to see it. How does he get in the infinity? Was there a witness that got up here and put him in the infinity? No. Do they have video from the surrounding area that shows him transferring into the infinity? No. I mean, presumably, he teleports into the infinity. I have no idea what their theory is going to be when they argue to you, but I'm going to be fascinated to hear it, because there's been no testimony about him in an infinity. How do we know it's an infinity in a drive-by? Well, the state is pretty sure it's an infinity. The state put on, this is one of my favorite experts of all of the state's experts, they put on an infinity identification expert who has worked with, infinity for years. And he can tell in any kind of grainy video that that car is an infinity. That's an amazing expert, but I'll take his testimony. That's fine. I think he's right. I think it's an infinity. And Mr. Kendrick is not in an infinity. And it's pretty hard to do a drive-by shooting if you are not in the car that did the drive-by. It is absurd. So again, there's no eyewitness testimony of Mr. Kendrick involved in the shooting. No weapons tying Mr. Kendrick to it. No ballistics. No fingerprints. No gunpowder residue. No DNA. Nothing. Nothing that you would expect to see. Now, the state has told you, well, you can look at circumstantial evidence. This is true. You can. And the state put up a dollar bill with some puzzle pieces missing. So, well, you can kind of infer that that's a dollar bill. And that's true. But don't go try to spin that dollar bill anywhere, because that dollar bill will not spend. And this evidence is not sufficient to convict beyond a reasonable doubt. Where's the cell phone data? Oh my gosh, you poor folks. You had to spend days listening to experts come in here and talk to you about cell phone location data. Where was Mr. Kendrick's cell phone location data putting him there? They didn't show you any. Who killed Donovan Thomas? I don't know who killed Donovan Thomas. But I think Mr. Shart's theory has some merit. Let's turn to the allegations that YSL is a gang.